Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
We're all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're with us in class today, broadcasting 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Andy is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. Dr. Norman Shealy is with us. Dr. Shealy, are you blissed?
You bet.
I was having a chat with Andy, and we were talking just before the broadcast started, and I love chatting with him. And we were talking about soft water, and I said, so in Minnesota, is the water hard? Is it soft? And he was saying that people have water softeners, but the water's hard, but they have water softeners. And so naturally I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on putting a water softener in, and here's why. Over the weekend, I was visiting one of my dear friends, and we were walking around his farm looking at some of the history, and probably a chimney that was built in the 1800s that's standing, but the old house place is not there, but the house isn't there, but the chimney is, and the foundation's there. And so we're looking at the spring, and we're looking for, where do we put the brine water that is used to clean the resin bed of a water softener in a place that's out in the country. And so naturally we've got lots of questions. Is soft water good for you, bad for you, neutral? What are your thoughts, Dr. Shealy?
Well, my favorite statement is halitosis is better than no breath at all.
Yeah.
But soft water replaces good things, actually magnesium and calcium out of the water, with sodium. So it's not
yes. good. No, geez. Because the problem
I would actually prefer to have an osmotic distiller or or plain distilled water than a softener.
Okay, one of the problems that we have in our neck of the woods is the water is so hard that it causes valve failures, like plumbing valve failures, washing machine failures, toilet float valves get stuck or they leak because of the calcium. There's so much calcium in the water, the pipes get caked with it. So it sounds to me like the answer is twofold. One is water softener for the appliances per se, and the other is have a separate non-softened plumbing component that is just untreated water, except maybe for ultraviolet or something like that, or reverse osmosis or some kind of a filtration system. Is that what we're talking about?
Exactly.
Okay.
Actually, the evidence is quite good that drinking naturally hard water is better for you than so-called soft water. Interestingly, when you go west of Missouri, the water is increasingly naturally softer, but that's not good because you actually need the calcium and the magnesium out of your water.
Mm-hmm. Is that one of the reasons, Dr. Shealy, why many of us may be magnesium deficient because of water softeners? There's so many of them.
I wouldn't doubt it at all, but the biggest reason is that the soil has been depleted of magnesium through erosion. We've been 10,000 or maybe 12,000 years out of the glaciers, and just from rain and wind alone, the soil gets depleted, but then the farming markedly depletes it further. As a cattle farmer, I know you have to supplement your cattle with magnesium.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, they die of grass staggers.
Yes.
And so vegetable and fruit farmers don't pay attention to that, but cattle farmers do. So unless you're raising your own food and taking care of the soil that way, you do need a lot of magnesium.
Okay. All right. So I've got a question for the class. I don't know the answer to this. I know a couple answers, but none of them is a really good answer. So the question is, class, if you've got an idea, I'd love to hear it. And if you want to call in, sometime today, next week, whenever, I'd love to hear the answer. Here's the question. So if you install a water softener in your home, and let's say you have some kind of land, let's say it's a half an acre, or let's say it's 10 acres, or let's say it's more, what do you do with the line that is used to flush the calcium out of the water? It's usually it's brine. You use salt in your water softener. Salt is mixed with water, and it flushes out the resin bed of these plastic beads that attract the calcium to the plastic beads, and then the salt in the water then releases the calcium from these beads or resin bed, and then you have to put that water someplace. So we're talking about salty water. Where do you put that? Now, if you put it on your lawn, it's going to kill the lawn. If you put it out where the trees are, eventually it'll kill the trees. So what do you do with it? What do you do with it? Now, city folk, I'm sure the answer is really simple. Oh, just send it down the drain, then you don't have to worry about it, right? And Andy and I were kind of laughing, and maybe in a morbid way, but Andy said, "Oh, I think salt is the least of our problems of the things that we put down the drain. Salt is probably the least of our problems." And we kind of shared, what goes down the drain? Well, body parts, from hospitals and paint, and we wash out the brushes and oil, motor oil. Oh, what do we do? I just pour it down the drain. Obviously, you don't want to do these.
Where do I throw up?
and seriously, you don't want to put these things down the drain because it causes all kinds of problems. But just imagine all the stuff, and then we haven't talked about industrial waste. Those guys hide the evidence and they just send it down the drain, and you can't figure out where it came from. But it's pretty darn serious, because we get a chance to drink that water again and again and again and again and again, because the amount of water we have is finite on this planet. We're not getting any more. What we've got is what we've got, and we've been reusing the same amount of water since the beginning of time, at least on this planet. So that was just a thought. What do you do with the brine water from flushing the resin bed of a water softener? Class,
interestingly, of course, I don't, but then I don't mind drinking naturally hard water.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And since I live on a farm and our water is tested to be sure there are no other contaminants, I don't have it. I guess I'd take it as far away from your property as you can.
Yeah, give it to the next guy. Oh, jeez. And that's what happens, Dr. Shealy. I know a farmer who will move his cows to the very far corner of his property, and like if he's going to pen up a bunch of cows that are going to have calves, or has a bunch of calves that he wants to kind of keep an eye on, he might keep 20 of them, and he wants to make sure they have water, so he puts them right next to the stream in this small area. So now these cows are peeing and pooping in the stream, and that's okay because it's right on the property line, and it doesn't mess up his water. It goes right next door to the next, to the neighbor. That's the kind of stuff that goes on, and it's unacceptable. It really is. But that's what goes on. We don't do that. We just let the cows go all over the farm. And our thought is, we use the grass as a filter for the excrement from the cows, and then we spread it around, use the sun as a disinfectant, and it becomes fertilizer. That's our plan. So we keep the grass long enough to act as a filter to keep the excrement from getting into streams where possible. However, we still let our cows swim in the ponds, in the very, very hot days. And we can't explain to them, don't pee and poop in the pond. But if we could, if they'd understand us, we would tell them. But they don't seem to understand that. So, Dr. Shealy, I guess the plan is natural water. Hard water is okay for consumption as long as it doesn't have other bad things in it, bacteria and toxins and those kinds of things. Soft water is not so good for the body, but it is for the appliances. So you can split your potable water system into soft water for the appliances and hard water for human consumption. Okay. What about the shower or the bathtub? Dr. Shealy, is there any problem with bathing in soft water?
Well, I don't think so. Bathing, maybe, but again, compared to fluoride and chlorine, I would say I don't mind a little sodium.
Yeah. I had a question about T-shirts. And my favorite T-shirts, I'm going to admit something that people are probably going to jump on me for. But for as long as I've been wearing T-shirts, I like the cotton polyester blend because it doesn't stretch. It doesn't stretch out of shape. It kind of conforms to my chest, and it doesn't bunch up. And for that reason, I like it. But am I harming myself by wearing a blend, let's say 35% polyester, 65% cotton T-shirts, under my regular shirt?
I don't think so. That's what I use. I consider it good. There are people who claim that all the artificial so-called fabrics other than cotton and linen and wool are bad for you, but I don't think the evidence is significant on that.
Okay. And one thing I would like to share with our class is when we wash clothes here at the farmhouse, we are concerned about the estrogenic compounds in detergents. So what we do, and I'd love to hear your comments, Dr. Shealy, on this procedure. If Mrs. Finelli's washing clothes, or I do, in the automatic clothes washer, and we have one that is the upright, top load type, and we put the clothes in it, and we, use soft water. So we use very little detergent. With soft water, you use less detergent than if you have hard water. And then when we're done washing the clothes, we spin rinse them again past the regular washing cycle. And our thought is we want to get as much of that estrogenic chemical and compounds out of the clothes. When we come back, would you tell us what your thoughts are? Is that a waste of time, or is it a good procedure? Dr. Norman Shealy is with us, medical doctor. Dr. Shealy, I was just chatting with Andy for a second, off the air during our break, and I wanted to share this with you. I'm sure you've seen the amount of rusted vehicles, 10 years old or so, around the Springfield Village that, these trucks have rusted through bumpers, rusted rocker panels, rusted tailgates. It's unbelievable the amount of rust. And we've tracked down why. And it's because the highway departments and municipalities and the government is applying salt on the roads, which we've known for years. They've been doing that probably since the 50s or maybe even before. But what they've done is they've combined the salt with beet juice. So when beets are used to manufacture sugar, the leftover, the byproduct, if you will, what do you do with that? It's a real pain to get rid of it. So what the beet industry is doing is selling that, or the sugar industry is selling that to municipalities to mix with the salt for roads. And here's what it does. Now, beet juice doesn't really lower the freezing point of salt, of water. But what it does is it makes the salt more sticky. So the salt that's applied on the road is less likely to wash down against the curb and down into the storm drain. So it's more likely to stick around and do its job longer than if salt were used alone without the beet juice. So the municipalities, if you do the research that you find on the internet, will tell you that the municipalities are saying, well, it's less corrosive. So this is a good thing. Well, beet juice is less corrosive, no question about it. But beet juice applied or mixed with salt makes the salt sticky, and it sticks to the undersides and panels of the car or truck, and it causes it to stay, the salt to stay there, which accelerates the rust. So really, it's lying by telling us that, beet juice is less corrosive. No, well, beet juice is less corrosive, but when mixed with salt, it's more corrosive because it sticks to the vehicles. And it's eating brake lines and tailgates and bumpers and rocker panels and quarter panels and every place else that it comes in contact with. It's really, really corrosive. So we were talking about that, and I said to Andy, I really don't like big government. And so whenever I get a chance to figure out a way of getting more equal with the government, I do. So I looked up, can this rust be considered a catastrophic loss? Like a hurricane or a tornado? No, you can't deduct it on your tax return because they say if it's slow and progressive, it's not tax deductible. However, vandalism is tax deductible. Well, vandalism is the act of causing damage, willful damage. Well, I consider applying beet juice and salt the act of causing willful damage to vehicles and bridges and roads and on and on and on. So I'm thinking it is tax deductible. Now, of course, if you go to a CPA, they'll say you're out of your mind. But I would challenge that, and I plan on challenging that on my next IRS 1040. I will be deducting as vandalism the cost of rust to our vehicles, which has been established at $853 per vehicle per year.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of ISIS though here.
So we got to get even with these thugs, okay? And the way to do it, I think, is through the dollar, through revenue. And I think if enough of us take on this act of applying salt and beet juice combination on the roads as an act of vandalism, if enough of us do it, I think they'll pull the beet juice out. Now, the other thing is, we know that salt kills life, in terms of grasses and trees and so forth. Where does all that salt go? The hundreds of millions of tons of salt. It goes into the water. It does. That doesn't stick to the grass. So I just wanted to mention that very briefly. Just a little rant. I'm sorry I got carried away, but it angers me, Dr. Shealy, that we have to replace our vehicles faster than we should because of beet juice.
Beet pulp.
Yeah, beet pulp, right. Let's see. When we come back, I've got so many medical questions. Do you have any thoughts or comments, Dr. Shealy, based on what I've said?
Yes, I wanted to bring up drugs.
Okay. Sounds good. When we come back, Dr. Norm Shealy. NormShealy.com. Dr. Norman Shealy is with us. NormShealy.com. NormShealy.com. And class, if you'd like to get your bliss oils, if you'd like to get Dr. Shealy's youth formula, if you'd like to find his books, all right there at NormShealy.com. NormShealy.com. Dr. Shealy, if someone wants to call and make an appointment to talk with you over the phone, a phone consultation or a Skype consultation, or to make an appointment to come see you in person, what's the best way to do that?
417-351-5221.
There you go, class. That's in Springfield, Missouri. That's Dr. Shealy's clinic, 417-351-5221. Repeat, 417-351-5221. Dr. Shealy, drugs. We're talking about water softeners. We're talking about contaminants in the water. You'd mentioned drugs.
Well, and in our city water, so-called, and the biggest effects are the estrogens. Plastic. A lot of plastics produce estrogenic-like substances. And drugs. Women take Now the average male produces 40 million sperm instead of 100 per cc or something, versus 150 million 60 years ago. So if we keep going at the rate we're going, when we get down to about 20 million, we will become infertile totally. And so the biggest single concern is the estrogen things that are in our water supply everywhere. It's changing fish, it's changing frogs, and it's changing people.
Dr. Shealy, are you saying that as we decline from 150 million sperm per unit of measure down to 40, that we are increasing the rate of destruction of sperm? Are we increasing that destruction at an increasing rate?
Well, we're decreasing the making of sperm. The more estrogen you've got, the less sperm you can make.
Okay. So are we decreasing the manufacturing of sperm, if you will, within the male
testicle
at an increasing rate? I mean, is this accelerating?
Exactly.
Okay. That's where I was going with that. And do you have a feel for how long it's going to take us to get down to 20 million where we become infertile?
Well, if we go as fast as we have in the last 60 years, I would say within 50 years we may disappear as a human race.
And this is predominantly caused by estrogenic compounds?
Yes. I'm sure that Roundup and other poisons contribute to it, but nothing is as bad, for the male at least, as excess estrogen.
Back in the 1960s, there used to be television commercials that would show women washing dishes in the kitchen sink, and it was about Playtex gloves, Playtex, and they would say so thin you could pick up a dime. And what they're saying is, it's almost like not wearing a glove. However, you can protect your hands from the hot water and the damage you're doing to your skin by washing dishes. Now, if we wash dishes without gloves in our kitchen sink, Dr. Shealy, are we absorbing more estrogenic compounds?
Yes.
Oh, jeez. So, what else are we doing that is increasing our intake of estrogenic compounds besides washing dishes in dishwashing liquid?
Well, there's some herbicides. I don't remember which ones, but plastic bottles, even the so-called BHP or BHA-free ones, are estrogenic. So, we just are stupid as human beings. I would say second to nuclear energy is artificial chemical poison.
As you say this, I'm thinking about, when I open a can, let's say it's a can of crushed tomatoes with chilies. Let's say I'm going to make some kind of a dish with that. Inside that can is sprayed a plastic lining. Inside most cans, you'll find a plastic lining. And if it's not a plastic lining in a can, if you decide to buy some mayonnaise or Miracle Whip or a jug of milk, they come in plastic as well.
Exactly.
Now, I don't think a person would find more than 10% of the containers in a supermarket today made out of glass. I think, I haven't really surveyed it or researched it, but I believe that about 90% of the containers that were glass are now plastic.
Yes,
because we used to have...
That is part of the problem. And by the way, it may not be as big a problem, but it is certainly a change. Puberty in girls is occurring 4 to 5 years earlier than it did 50 years ago because of the excess estrogens.
I remember reading a story about Puerto Rico and how because of the chicken diet in many families in Puerto Rico, this is probably 20, 25, maybe even 30 years ago, that they were saying that the chickens, when they were being raised, were fed estrogen chemicals to make the breasts more plump of the chickens, which gave more white meat. And in Puerto Rico, the families were eating more chicken than maybe the rest of the United States, and they were finding that the age of puberty, or the age at which a young girl could reproduce, was going lower and lower and lower, and we're reaching like 10 years old or lower. That was decades ago. So is that,
as far as I can tell, it's part of chemical pollution.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so wow, so that's a real problem. What do we do? How do we get around, or how do we avoid some of these plastics in our lives? Because now I'm thinking, even in our house, when I was growing up, our plumbing system was the new technology, which was copper pipes, back in the very early 60s. There was a transition around late 1950s, early 1960s, from iron pipes that were galvanized. I'm talking about domestic water supply, hot and cold, galvanized plumbing, to copper. And then we transitioned from copper to PVC and CPVC. And then we've transitioned to PEX, P-E-X. But PEX is plastic, PVC is plastic, CPVC is plastic. And copper is so darn expensive and is much harder to install that I don't think many houses use copper anymore. So we've got plastic plumbing. If you go to a restaurant that's relatively new, maybe within the last couple of decades, it's going to be plastic plumbing there. You've got plastic plumbing in your house, plastic bottles, plastic lining in the cans. Is there a way that we can avoid some of this, Dr. Shealy?
Well, I guess maybe the only way would be to distill the water you drink.
Right. Okay. That would remove the plastic, sure. But if you're going to eat food out of a can, we can pretty much almost forget that it's going to have plastic in it. So
exactly.
It's going to be hard to avoid.
At least if you buy frozen foods instead of canned goods, they are generally in a, well, the plastic is going to be bad because it's frozen. It's not going to dissolve out as well.
Yeah, it'll be in a plastic bag.
Right.
And for those who pack their lunch and take it to work, it's in a plastic baggie or a plastic Tupperware container. It's everywhere. Gosh, even distilled water, if you buy it at the stores, in a plastic bottle, regardless whether you buy the 12-ounce size, the 1 liter size, the gallon size, the 5-gallon refillable jugs. It's all in plastic. Well,
have you ever heard
at
of
least
using atrazine?
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Please chat about that.
It is the second largest pesticide and the most heavily used herbicide in the United States, and it is estrogenic.
So where are we using this, Dr. Shealy? Are we using it?
Golf courses, farms,
okay, why don't we mention this?
550,000 industrial chemical poisons released in the atmosphere every year.
Mm-hmm. Why don't we just expose this, Dr. Shealy, as it really is? Many years ago, I met so many people over the course of my life, and people would say, "Yeah, I'm going to buy this new place, and it's unbelievable. It's right on a golf course, And I was thinking, have you lost your mind? Yeah, but the view, and I can go just walk right over to the golf course. It's great, but they're spraying the golf course lawns, the greens, with so many chemicals. It's crazy to live near there. But yet people think that that's a great place to live because it's close to exercise. And then when they walk on the grass, they get these pesticides, they get these insecticides, and these chemicals on their shoes, and their pants, and their socks.
Come in your house.
Yeah. And they're breathing it. And I would think that that's got to be one of the most dangerous places to live, on a golf course.
Oh, absolutely. unequivocally. And to play golf.
Yeah. We'll be right back. Dr. Shealy's with us. Dr. Shealy, during the break, I looked up some websites about living near a golf course, anything to be aware of, any concerns, any dangers. And I just want to read a post on a forum that I think exposes ignorance on a grand scale. So this guy says, and this is a response to the question, do you need to be concerned about living near a golf course? The guy says, I'm no golfer, but I'd be surprised if any dangerous chemicals would be used around a public place.
How stupid can you get?
Yeah, because he increases his display of ignorance by saying, in order to spray pesticides, one must be trained and licensed. They don't just hand a dangerous chemical to any dummy that comes along. I worked for a city government, and the rules were extremely strict and very well monitored. If you're concerned, I would go pay a visit to the groundskeeper supervisor and perhaps the local city government to see what their pesticide policy is. That's what this guy said. That's a quote. And I can tell you that Mrs. Finelli had in the Commonwealth of Virginia a pesticide license. She went for training on how to apply and dispose of the containers that pesticides come in. The reason she went there was to learn about how dangerous these things are, not to apply them, but to see what. And this was a government training session, and these things are so dangerous that the disposal of the containers, empty containers that these pesticides come in, are regulated. You've got to dispose of them in a specific way, or you can be fined. I'm talking about the empty bottles, jugs, cans that pesticides come in. Okay. Well, this post just says that. Well, I'll just say it again. I'm no golfer, but I'd be surprised if any dangerous chemicals would be used around a public place. Really? How about a restaurant, right, Dr. Shealy? They spray for roaches. Those are dangerous chemicals. Okay, and they're regulated. So just because they're regulated doesn't mean they're not used.
How about termites?
Termites? Okay, let's take it to the ultimate. Nuclear reactors are regulated.
Until they blow up.
Yeah, and they have blown up. We've got 3 Mile Island in this country. We've had lots of leaks, lots of alarms going off. We've got Fukushima, and we've got Chernobyl. I mean, just to name the big ones. So I just wanted to share with you this post about ignorance, and there's a difference between regulations and danger. Just because something is regulated doesn't remove the danger from it.
It improves or increases the danger.
Jeez, unbelievable. Dr. Shealy, how about a scalar update? Do you have one for us about what you're doing with scalar energy?
Well, we've got almost all but 4 of the 12 people that are going to use it to measure telomere regeneration. And the other 4, I hope, will be in the bag sometime in the next month. But I predict that we're going to have a significant growth of telomeres. But it'll take us a year.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mrs. Finelli and I are doing this every day. I guess we were one of the early ones to be part of the study.
You and I were the first.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I wanted to tell you that I'm taking it very seriously, and I'd like to, when we come back after this break, I'd like to ask you if you think that holding the scalar energy antenna, if you will, against my chest is beneficial. Increases the benefit of the scalar energy by being closer, almost in contact. The only distance would be the plexiglass in front of the antenna and my shirt. So I'm putting it right against me. Would you tell me what your thoughts are? Tell the class what your thoughts are about, bringing it closer and closer. We'll be right back with Dr. Norman Shealy. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, blissed. Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. Hour number 2. We've got an instructor on hold, senior instructor on hold. But first, I wanted to just finish up very quickly. Dr. Shealy, holding your scalar energy device, your adrenomedulin device, right against my chest or against an area that someone wants to improve his or her health, do you think that there is an additional improvement versus having it a foot or 2 away?
Yes. And the reason I think that is when we did the blood test under a microscope, we had the drop of blood on the slide just a couple of inches in front of the thing, and the effect was in 20 minutes it reduced the inflammatory response in that drop of blood by 80%. Now, in people, I can't say that we didn't repeat the draw from them, but their free radicals went down only 40%. So I would say there's a great advantage to having close to you.
Okay, and what would you recommend as a starting point in terms of time? Is it a minute? Is it 5 minutes? Is it take a nap?
I would say 20 minutes.
Okay. So if I were to take a nap, just lie down and just place this, and what is it, class? It's like, the way I would describe it is kind of like an 8.5 by 11 size piece of paper, if you will. It's about 1/4 of an inch, well, maybe a little thicker than that, maybe 3/8 of an inch thick, and it has a plexiglass front and back, and inside is the antenna array with the electronics to drive it in the scalar range. And it doesn't make any noise. You can't feel it, can't see it, can't hear it, and it's very low power. And so in my case, what I would do is just I'll lie down, maybe take a 20-minute nap, and with this right on my chest. So is that what we're talking about, Dr. Shealy?
Absolutely.
Okay. And I'll let you know.
You've given me an idea. We've proven that with the PIMF device, having it within a couple of inches of the brain, it produces gamma. Now, scalar, interestingly, produces delta, which is deep relaxation. But what I want to do in the next person we test it in is to put the scalar 12 inches away versus 1 inch away from the head. And that'll tell us how much it affects the brain.
Okay. And one other thing I'd like to mention about the pulse electromagnetic frequency device that you and Lou Cassidy have engineered together. That device, I used to put that over my mom's head, and for, 10 minutes or so. And her hearing improved. There's no question in my mind her hearing improved. So there's something there in addition to some of the other positive benefits that you're seeing, Dr. Shealy. I'm not saying that this is going to work for everybody, but we have a fairly large kitchen, and I would say my mom would sit at one end of the kitchen. She had her chair for reading, and I'd say, Mom, and she'd have to look at me to hear what I was saying, or I'd have to get closer to her. Well, with the after a few weeks of the PEMF device, I could talk to her across the room, and she could hear me perfectly clearly.
Wow.
Absolutely so.
Now, there's another use I hadn't thought about.
And I have a feeling that if someone has, and correct me if I'm wrong, is there a link between beginning stages of dementia or Alzheimer's and hearing loss? Is there something there? I think there is.
But it's not as tight as some other things, because hearing loss is actually probably many times more common than Alzheimer's.
Okay. I'm delighted to bring back to the airwaves Senior USA Preparedness Instructor, Captain John Regan. Wow, it's great to see you on the call screen, Captain John Regan. Welcome.
Is it Monday already?
Is it Monday? Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Well, I had my vitamin D levels checked by the VA a little over a month ago, and I need some vitamin D advice, Dr. Shealy.
What was your level?
I don't know exactly, but the test leveled out at 120, so it was greater than 120.
Well, 120 is fine. The average physician doesn't know that. They think, it should be not above 100. Mine runs about 160. It's totally safe. Up to 150. How much are you taking?
Normally, the 150,000 a week.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's what I've done for 15 years now, and it's excellent for your immune system. Here I am. Last week we had 3 or 4 people who came in for IVs because of the flu. I'm exposed to them and all kinds of things, and I have to say I haven't come near having a viral infection.
And then go ahead.
I consider 120 to 150 the safe levels. And actually, I like to have it at least at 100.
Okay. Well, the other thing on my journey, I got my DNA test back this morning, and I do have 2 copies of the H363D gene variation, which is the milder form of hemochromatosis. And I'm having a dickens of a time with the VA because their ferritin test is over 100 points lower than what I get at LabCorp.
Interesting. Very interesting.
With their test, I don't qualify for the definition of hemochromatosis. With the LabCorp test, I do.
Fascinating, John. I don't think labs should vary that much. I mean, they shouldn't, but who knows with the government. Obviously, I would suggest in your case that you don't take any supplements that have added iron, of course.
No, I haven't done that for over a decade.
And you don't cook in cast iron skillets or pots.
But it makes it very difficult because the way you treat it is to, normally you go donate blood.
Exactly.
But because I was an Air Force officer in Europe for 3 years, I am permanently banned. And it's really, really frustrating. In fact, when I went and talked to the doctor last, I brought up there's a doctor that's Professor Emeritus at Dartmouth. His specialties are hematology and oncology. He has done studies, one with over 8,000 people on iron overload. And he even works at one of the VA hospitals up in Connecticut. And it's like they don't even care what he's found.
Well, I'm sorry, John. I appreciate the fact that you have served our country. I love the people who serve our country, but I don't love the government, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'm going to go get my levels retested this week. I have tried IP6 for probably about 3 weeks now to see if that'll chelate any of the iron. And I'm going to go, we have 2 labs here that I can go to, Quest Labs and LabCorp, and see if I can get 2 commercial labs to agree that it's over 300, and maybe I can get some movement on that.
Well, good on you, mate. I hope you can make some progress with any government bureaucracy. I wouldn't promise.
John, I've got a question for you. John, so you're saying that you have, you believe you have higher than normal levels of iron in your blood. Is that correct?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I can even point to studies on NIH.gov, and when you've got these gene variations along with a serum ferritin greater than 300 if you're a male, that is the definition for having hereditary hemochromatosis.
Yes.
Okay. So, John, and did I hear you say that and Dr. Shealy, that the answer is to donate blood, but you can't because you were in Germany during the mad cow period? mad cow disease, and you are banned from donating blood, which would
That's correct.
And donating blood would remove blood from your system, and with it the iron, the excess iron. Correct? Is that right?
You get about 30 points per blood draw, roughly.
All right. So then the next step is you can't donate blood. Why can't you have blood drawn and throw the blood away? Why can't you do that?
You have to have a prescription.
You want a prescription?
Yes.
I'll give you a prescription.
Okay, so did I just hear the solution, John?
That would be a solution, because I can take a prescription down to the blood bank, and it's only going to take about 10 times at my level to get down to under 100, which is where the damage starts occurring to your body.
Okay, so Dr. Shealy, is this the fix? What we believe is the fix for John Regan's condition?
Well, it sounds to me as if it should be. And again, I know John, pretty well. I'm perfectly happy to give him a prescription based upon what he's telling me.
There you go.
I do that for any friend.
That's great. That's great. There you go.
Give me a note, John, I'll get it to you.
Okay.
John, would you like to stick around for some more of the broadcast with Dr. Norm Shealy?
I can stick around for a few more minutes.
That's great. That's great. Captain John Regan's with us. Dr. Norman Shealy's with us. I'm Vin Finelli. This is USA Prepares. I hope that was an educational few minutes with Captain John Regan and iron. We'll be right back. Dr. Shealy's with us, medical doctor, and Captain John Regan's with us, U.S. Air Force Reserves retired. Captain John Regan, do you have further questions, thoughts, comments, concerns that you'd like to share?
Just let you know I'm sending an email with a copy of my lab report, so you have that available.
Great.
And I did want to bring something else up that I didn't get a chance to talk to last time I was on the air with you, Vincent. It's the last thing on my post from when we were on the air, and that gives a playlist on YouTube from Suspicious Observers talking about space weather. Mm-hmm. And we're going into some very interesting times, because we have talked about how the Earth's magnetic shield is getting weaker, which allows more space weather, including radiation, into Earth. At the same time, we have the sun getting weaker, which allows more radiation from outside the solar system to make it in, because the heliosphere serves as a protector for the solar system. As it turns out, there's a third level involved now. We have been traveling through a magnetic cloud that has also protected our solar system, and we're moving out of that cloud into a void area of space. So every day we're moving further and further out of that protection we've been in for I don't know how long. So we're going to have like a triple whammy of outside radiation affecting our weather. We may see things that hasn't been seen for a long time, or possibly even never in human history. So I offer that playlist up. It's quite interesting, and it could be I wouldn't say a fun time, but at least interesting.
Captain John Regan, are you saying that these conditions are the reason why we're experiencing some of these violent extremes that we're seeing now? For example, I've seen a 50-degree temperature change here on the farm from the coldest part of a day to the warmest part of a day in 2 days. He's saying that kind of thing is can be explained by this?
I believe it's a factor in that. They've done a lot of good research, not just, the layman type. They have some professionals that are working on this too and writing papers. The the space weather affects things like earthquakes. It's this electromagnetic, fluctuations that go between the sun and the planets. When you get the space weather, which excites that, they've got a very, very good correlation between when the space weather arrives and quakes. There's also an association between space weather and health, and it depends on what has, when the space weather interacts with the atmosphere, it can excite electrons at the ground level, and that affects health given the electrical nature of the body. And when you have some of these storms as well, this is when you'll see funky electrical things happen, including some outages that nobody knows why it happened, but it just so happens to happen at these times.
Okay, are you suggesting that we're going to see the result of communications disruptions that will really wreak havoc on humanity as a result of the space weather? What I'm talking about is 2G, 3G, 4G, possibly 5G, internet communications, the supply chain communications, and of course communications among just casual communications as well. Are we talking about all of that being disrupted?
Well, we already know that during certain solar storms there can be interruption in communication. But let's just briefly refer to the Carrington event when we get back, and that should pretty much wrap it up.
Very good. Captain John Regan's with us, and I'd love to hear Dr. Norman Shealy's comments regarding, his thoughts about the space weather disruptions, electromagnetic energies that we're being shielded from and being damaged by. Dr. Norman Shealy is with us. Captain John Regan's with us. John, your thoughts?
Well, we've talked about the Carrington event quite a bit, and that's simply a large enough solar storm that's directed at Earth. And we have not experienced one of those in our modern electronic society. And that is going to be very damaging. Now, what we have to also consider in this is that with Earth's shield being weaker than it has been, it is not going to take as strong a storm to do the same damage. Now, we don't need to be, scared of just normal space weather quite so much, because we're hit with solar storms all the time. It's just not the intensity of something like the Carrington event. But when we do get hit with one of those, what I think is going to be really bad, because there were reports of telegraph offices catching fire from this event, and houses were not wired back then. Today, you have wires going to every structure, so the amount of fires that get generated would just totally overwhelm fire departments.
Very, very good point. And what you're saying in so many words is that the reason that the telegraph offices burned down in 1859 during what was called the Carrington event is because the telegraph wires acted as antennas to pick up this electromagnetic blast. And now, not only do we have, the telegraph wires have been replaced with power lines and in-home and in-business wiring. So, for example, our home has thousands of feet of wire. Every apartment, every house in the United States has some kind of wire in it, every one. So they are all antennas that can pick up these blasts of electromagnetic frequencies. And what happens is this energy hops on the wire and looks for the end of the wire. And wherever the end of the wire is, it's really looking for a ground. Well, if you happen to have a Blu-ray player or a telephone or a television or a computer plugged in to the wire, it's going to hit it and it's going to destroy it. most likely. Dr. Shealy, your thoughts?
Well, I honestly don't know. Obviously, we've been through this. I mean, there was a big solar storm in 1859. Of course, that was before we had widespread use of electric and electromagnetic circuitry. The observation of this solar flare back in 1859 was the last time we've had a big one that we know of. I think everything is be prepared. I mean, many people would be in serious trouble if they lost electricity, for instance, which is certainly possible when there's a huge disturbance. I think the most important thing is USA prepares, period. No matter how you look at it, stay prepared for emergencies.
That's very kind of you to say that, Dr. Shealy. And I was at one of our dear friends and instructors' houses yesterday, and we actually spent time looking at his electrical panel and his generator, and we pulled out the manual because we wanted to figure out how do we wire some circuits and add some switches so that he could power, the necessities, a few lights, the well, let me say it a different way, the well, the pump for the well. That was the big one. How do we make sure that he has water for his family, and maybe some way of cooking that doesn't take too much current, and power the heating system, which is propane. How do we make sure that the circulator motor is working? And that's what we're looking at. How do we protect from these kinds of events? It's a concern to me.
Well, you
Captain John Regan,
remember back in it was about 1985 or 7. Springfield was without electric power for 2 weeks. Out on our farm, we were out only 1 week. So, and that was just from normal, moderate extremes of weather. So, losing electric power is a huge thing. Fortunately, we have a backup diesel generator which would keep simple things going. I think every home ought to be prepared with at least some kind of diesel electric generator to cover the minimum things in case of a major outage.
And I'm glad you brought up diesel, and class, here's why. Typically, a gasoline or propane-powered generator will run at wide open throttle, 3,600 RPM. If you look at your lawnmower, push lawnmower, for example, you run that at wide open throttle, 3,600 RPM. The life expectancy of one of those engines, if you change the oil every 25 hours, which is once a day, if you ran it continuously, but just stopping to change the oil, the life expectancy is 30 days, 1 month. That's it. And they're worn out. So the reason we have generators that hang around for, 10 years is because we don't run them continuously for day after day after day. But they only last 24 hours times 30. That's the life expectancy of many of these small generators. Now, the diesel generators, many of them operate at half of that RPM, 1,800. And because of that, they can a heavy-duty diesel generator would have a life expectancy of about 8,000 hours. Now, of course, you have to change the oil, and they're more expensive, and they're heavier and all that. But I bought a used military surplus diesel generator. It's almost the size of a refrigerator lying on its back. Weighs about 1,000 pounds. And I think, if memory serves me correctly, about $1,400. So it's more expensive than one of these new ones at Home Depot or Lowe's. But if you're going to spend $1,000 for that, and it has a life expectancy of 30 days, you might want to consider spending a little bit more and getting a used military surplus diesel, which will last probably the rest of your life. So I just wanted to share those thoughts. John, any other comments you'd like to share or questions you have for Dr. Shealy?
Well, one thing on the the power, and then one final on the hemochromatosis. You may want to consider getting Stan Deo back on the air. He now has a device that you can install in your panel that will protect your house from things like EMP.
A device that will protect from an EMP. And is this beyond whole house surge protection? Or is this whole house surge protection?
It basically takes what's coming in and will automatically take it to ground.
Okay, I dropped one of those off. Yeah, I dropped whole house surge protection. I dropped one off at our friend's house yesterday, and I left it in a box. And there was no label on the box, just a brown box. And he said, "What's this?" And I said, "Well, that's for you to figure out, and let me know when you figure it out. That's your homework, your test question." He called me right back, and he said when I got home, and he knew what it was, and we're going to install it. So yeah, that's a good idea. But I will call Stan Deo. Thank you for reminding me, John Regan.
And Dr. Shealy, I did send you an email. And
John, I'll be right back to you.
Okay, and it's important to note that it's for hereditary hemochromatosis. The difference is if you just go to the blood bank for a blood draw, it's $75 a time. And if you're hereditary hemochromatosis, they don't charge you.
Well, you haven't been diagnosed with hereditary.
I've got 2 copies of the H63D gene.
Okay.
I can get a screenshot of that and send it to you if you'd like.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. John Regan, anything else?
That's it.
Great, John. It's great hearing your voice. I'm looking forward to hearing you more and more and more, John Regan.
Well, I hope so, but I tell you that the fatigue that this causes is just debilitating. And it's going to take me at least 10 weeks just to get down where my iron levels are not causing any problems. And then I don't know how long it's going to take for the damage to be undone, because this damages a lot of your organs.
Keep us posted, okay?
Will do.
Thanks, baby.
Hey, thanks so much, Captain John Regan. Quick question, Dr. Shealy. I was talking with Andy, our engineer, and we were talking about the TENS unit, TENS, class that stands for Transcutaneous Electrical Nerve Stimulation. And Dr. Shealy was the inventor of that. And I was describing who Dr. Shealy is to Andy, and Andy said, "Wow, this is great." And he was mentioning that his one of his relatives has one of these devices from the 1980s. And so his question for you, Dr. Shealy, is there a change in current production, TENS units versus today? Is there any reason to update, or is it do the same job that it did, the newest production model versus the original units?
It should be just as good.
Okay. All right. So there you go, Andy. The answer is it's just as good. We've got Kyle. Oh, Kyle is just listening. Oh, jeez. Well, sorry about that, Kyle. I hit the air button, and well, why don't we just say hi to Kyle? But he's just listening. Kyle, do you have any questions, comments, concerns?
Yeah, I do, actually, Vince. I'll stay on.
Okay, great. Kyle, USA Preparedness Instructor in Montana, is with us. Dr. Norman Shealy is with us. We'll be right back after these few short commercial announcements. Dr. Norman Shealy is with us, class, and if you'd like to visit his website, sign up for his free newsletter, normshealy.com, NORMSHEALY.com. Kyle, you had some thoughts.
I did. I caught your comments on the generator, and I thought I'd throw this in there. Of course, when we lived off the grid before, we had a bunch of animals. 6 goats, 3 horses, 6 hogs. A whole bunch of stuff out there, and so I would wind up having to run my Makita generator approximately an hour to 2 hours every day. Even in the summertime, if you had to go fill, 80 gallons of water, you're not going to try to do that off of your solar bank. You know, it just ain't going to work very well, at least the one I had. Mm-hmm. And anyway, after 5.5 years of running that generator that much, it started burning oil. And what I found out, to make a long story short, is I took the head off of it and took a dial caliper on the inside of the cylinder wall and checked it. And believe it or not, that cylinder wall was still in factory specs. I couldn't hardly believe it. And what it was a little bent head gasket. They have little thin metal head gaskets for those things. And I put a new head gasket on there, and that thing runs like brand spanking new. So I talked to a friend of mine who owns he repairs all kinds of tools and generators and engines and all that kind of stuff. And he told me, he said, you know, if you're going to live off grid and you can only afford a gasoline generator, he said, you better get a Japanese one. Because he said none of the ones that, the Generacs and a lot of those, unless they're commercial, he said if you get the regular little cheap Home Depot, Lowe's type generators, Champion, those kind of things like that, he said they just don't hold up to that. In fact, their companies and even the Japanese ones will not warranty generators if you live off grid with them. But just so people know, I ran it on nothing but synthetic. I changed it every 20 to 30 hours, the oil in that, and I ran nothing but non-ethanol premium in it with an additive called Seafoam all of its life. I mean, since brand new. But I got 5.5 years out of it, and now it still runs perfect. I mean, won't smoke, nothing, starts right up. Amazing little generator. I've been extremely happy with it. But again, it's not a diesel. It's not as good. But if you can't afford it, and you can get a little Japanese type generator, I prefer Makita or Yamaha Hondas. In cold weather, I've had a hard time getting them started. But I just thought I'd throw that little bit out there for people if they're interested.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And what I was talking about is those inexpensive generators that have like a lawnmower engine, not a Honda engine. I'm talking about an American engine like Briggs & Stratton that's not commercial, will not last very long. It really won't. And you're running those engines wide open throttle. I mean, and if you start one up at night and you look at the exhaust, the muffler, you will see it glowing red hot. Literally. If you run it for 15 minutes, that exhaust will be red hot. You can see the red glow at night. And that's when you realize this thing is really working hard. And that's why they don't last very long. They're working hard, and they're not designed to last very long, where the higher tolerances engines last longer. And what you said was very, very important. Full synthetic oil. Yep. And that's a key.
On that quick note, too, the two best oils I have found personally is Mobil 1 and Amsoil. And I prefer Mobil 1. But anyway.
Yep, I use Mobil 1 in our equipment as well whenever I can. And I really like Amsoil. I really do. Dr. Shealy, any comments?
Well, I think being prepared is to have a diesel generator.
Yeah, you're right. Kyle in Montana, thank you so much for calling in and being with us.
And the 6564 number still ain't working, Vince.
Okay. I'll see if, John Stadmiller, I think, has Zeno Radio's phone number. I'll ask him for it, and I'll call him up, and I'll ask him what gives. Why doesn't our listen? Why is it so flaky? Yeah. Thanks so much, Kyle.
You bet.
Dr. Shealy, thank you so much for spending time with us.